Welcome back to the podcast, friends. It's Anastasia here, joined by the one and only Vic Fomenko.
Nice to be back. Your favorite co-host or guest or whatever you call me.
I love that you've claimed yourself as the favorite. It's been a minute and we're back because we would love to have more conversations with you. The amount of people that still feel like there should be a podcast every week is hilarious, y'all, because I've slowed these down. But I have loved how many of you have enjoyed these. So here we are, a new day, a new conversation.
Let's go.
How are you feeling, Vic?
Feel great.
I mean, we did just get back from vacation. We should be feeling great.
Yeah, should be feeling great.
I missed you. I was with you like 24/7.
Yeah. And you missed me?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know how you get
That's
back
wonderful.
from vacation, you go right back to work and it's real life. And yeah, it was a good time. We celebrated our friend's 40th. We are at this place in our friend group where many of us are turning 40. That is happening
I'm
for
gonna be
you
40 in a couple
in
months.
January. Yeah. But you know what? We're loving it because I believe that first of all, 40 is the new 30, and
Flourishing in the 40s.
Flourishing in the 40s. I saw this quote. I can't remember exactly how it goes. Something along the lines of like, up to 40, your whole life is just research, and then you get to live out what you've learned. So I'm excited that you're on.
Thank you.
I'm excited that we can have more conversations. I think there are more conversations to be had about a lot of things, but there's one specific thing I wanted to go after today. First of all, if y'all ever have topic ideas, some of you have, written and shared some of these things, which is why we're, coming with topics at you. Specifically, if you have something that's, you feel like is gonna pertain to a lot of, audience out there, make sure to let us know, because we'd love to go after the things that people need to hear truth about. I know there's a lot of amazing podcasts out there, and we're not claiming like we know everything.
No.
But I think for us, we do come on here to share our life, share real life. Mm-hmm. I just love, one of the things that I really, really honor and value about our marriage, and you specifically, babe, is that we value realness.
Yeah, we do. Vulnerability, openness.
But I also feel
realness.
like, okay, when we first got married, I don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast, but I used to try to control Vic in crowds. I used to be very specific with how I wanted us to be perceived as, which came from a lot of my own brokenness. And so when we would be out and about, whether it's with, with people that we honor, admire, or love, our families even, we'd get in the room and I'd try to be like, don't say that. Don't do this. Because Vic is like, can kind of get unleashed in friend group settings. And so
I did speak and then think.
I did a lot of controlling in my first years of marriage. Attempting to control.
I was pretty off the leash.
I know, and it never worked. I feel like it made things worse.
Any couples out there that one of you or both of you tried to kind of like control each other? What do you think that came from? What do you think? What was the place in your heart that made you want to do that?
Well, I think fear of man was the ultimate root. Wanting to be perceived as something. I wanted to control people's perception of me. And so therefore, I had to look like the part, whether it was in marriage, in ministry, even in raising kids. I remember when London was a teeny little thing, I'm like, God forbid she acted out in the public, or not even just in public, but like in front of people I knew. It was just so embarrassing because, oh my gosh, what is everyone going to think around me? And I think years of that caused me to one, it was a journey, obviously, but there was a time where the bubble kind of went and it burst.
I think culturally, we both grew up in families and in an environment where like the top phrase, like in our communities, not just our particular families, but just in our communities, our churches, the phrase was like, what are people going to say?
What will people think?
What will people say?
What are people going to say? Absolutely.
So like you put on an outfit that, your parent doesn't like, and it's like, what are people going to say? You know, you say something that's inappropriate.
For sure, you're wired with that mindset.
Yeah, and so we just rehearse this thing that the most important thing in life is what people will think or say about you, which is going to cause you not to be real and vulnerable and genuine. And so I think once we undid some of that pressure and lie, we were able to be our real selves, because we died to the idea of like, we are addicted or I don't know, controlled by the idea of what are people going to say. That as we discovered truth, we decided to live more by truth, because, you know, truth sets you free. And so when you discover like vulnerability as something that's like a massive principle that transforms our life, when we discover that, we're like, that truth is worth going after more than like being misunderstood. And I think a lot of people, their biggest fear is to be misunderstood. Mm-hmm. I think for me, that was one of my fears, because it's like, you genuinely are who you are. Like, you have a good heart, you love God, you love people, you do your best. And then people like get on you, get critical, and think that you're horrible, say stuff about you. And it's just like, man, like, you don't know me.
Right.
And so I think people in general, especially when their heart's pure and good and they're doing everything right, and they're from their perspective, that's a big one. And I think, I think it's an important one to die to. Like,
right.
I think we have this core need to feel heard and understood. But when we like take that need of being heard and understood and like project it onto strangers or people or everyone, we get trapped. Because I think like the concept of being heard and understood is very, very important. And it needs to be like, I think we need to feel heard and understood by the Lord. I think we need to feel heard and understood by like one another. And we need to fight for that, because that feeling of like, hey, like, I want to say something, can you just hear me, you know, is so important for someone to feel affirmed or validated or like seen and heard, even if you disagree, but to like feel understood, I think is important. And I think sometimes what we do is we take that God-given core need that's really good for intimate relationships, and then we kind of like project it farther than it needs to go. And we try to be heard and understood by everyone. And then it's a trap, because then you have to perform, and then you can't actually be free.
For sure. So where's the boundary to, I think there is a healthy measure of that, where we should allow ourselves to be fully known, fully understood. Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes...
and then unconditionally accepted.
Absolutely. What happens when I don't have that? Like, I think you and I are thriving in one of the most amazing communities, right? I mean, we did build a lot of that. Yeah. It didn't just come to us. As I think people want that.
You don't go find a great community, you build it.
You build it.
Just like you don't go find a great marriage, you build one.
100%.
You don't find a great family, you build it.
Because, and I think that's revelation right there.
Yeah.
You don't find it, you build it. And that is why so many people are disappointed today, because in their minds, when I enter that community, or when I enter that church, or when I enter that friend group or that club, there's this expectation that it's all going to happen to me. But I think ultimately the best version of relationships that we experience is the one that we've built.
That's right.
The one that's taken time, the one where we've plowed, we've had hard conversations. I think nothing beats that, because when you're fully known, that means these people in your life, they've seen you at your worst, and they've still chosen to accept you. Something that we would call in our community the culture of honor.
Yeah.
And that's a huge piece that we didn't grow up with, or not even grow up with, just in general. I think obviously it's been a revelation that's been unfolding, and I love Danny Silk talks about the culture of honor, and it's incredible, and multiple of his books. But I think when I first heard that language, I was like, yeah, honor. But it's not external. It's not how we treat, the people that are important in our lives, or even, leaders or whoever that has important, position, but it's really how we treat people in our heart. And I think the culture of honor, specifically even in our marriage and our family, really has transformed how we do life and how we see people, even how we see people in their mess and in their mistakes and what they've done. I think early on in the ministry, I used to be so hard on people. I've had to go back and repent to people that I discipled and was just like, you should know better and how dare you, because I had no language for why they were acting out, that it wasn't about that sin or whatever issue that they were in. It was really about their identity. And obviously now, years later, understanding the power of identity, that when someone comes to me about their sin, I'm like, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about something deeper.
Like, yes, the fruit's important. We need to address it. It's not that we're not concerned about it. It's like, we just understand that there's a root behind that, that's the most important thing.
Right. Well, because it's like, we can fix that. We can be concerned about the external, fix that. But tomorrow it's going to rear its head in something else.
That's right.
In another addiction or another, behavior. And so I think that's why this identity and honor conversation, I think identity, who we are becoming, but honor is how we see people in how they're supposed to become, right?
That's good. I mean, we can define that a little bit better, because I think sometimes people...
You always define things better. I just start the conversation and you define.
I love to define terms, but I think
I love it.
Culture of honor is something that we've learned and really brought as a building block to the culture that we've kind of even built with our friendships, because we're talking about our community that we've built and some of the culture behind it. And I think our family that we've built and some of the culture behind it, I think, is part of our conversation today. And, one of the cultures that we have built, and before we didn't have it, we didn't know it, but we started to observe it, read about it, hear about it, and started to really build it. But culture of honor. And basically, in short, I think I define it, I think I heard probably, either Bill Johnson or Danny Silk maybe mention it this way, but culture of honor is basically seeing someone for who they are in Christ, in God, and in their identity, without stumbling over who they're not yet. So basically, when someone makes a mistake, I don't see them for what they did, because that's not who they are in Christ. That's something that's like part of what's cut off, right? That old nature, that old habit, that old thing is not actually who they are. They're a new creation in Christ. And so culture of honor says, I'm going to choose to see you no matter what you do for who you actually are, with your created value, with your new creation reality. I'm going to see you by the Spirit. I'm going to see you from God's eyes, no matter what you do. So culture of honor basically creates an environment where you will not change your perspective of someone based on their behavior, because your perspective is informed by what God has made them to be and who they really are. So you can see by the Spirit, like their gifting, their calling, their identity, their nature, the uniqueness of how God created them. And that's how you always choose to see someone. So no matter what someone brings to you, like, hey, I've been having this really big sin problem in my life. And you're not like, oh no, horrified, what are we going to do about this? You're like, you start to call out who they really are. And you don't see them any differently. You don't treat them differently. And you don't ignore the symptom, but you realize behind that is a root issue. And typically it's probably connected to, you don't believe who you really are. Because when you believe and you're rooted in your identity of who you really are, you behave according to that rather than behaving in a different way. And so I think culture of honor basically is something where you start to call out the gold in people rather than call out the mistakes in people. I think in a different culture or different environment, people typically will call out any issues or problems immediately. In a culture of honor, you'll see a problem, and instead of calling out the problem, which is pretty obvious, you'll call out the gold, because whatever you speak to will flourish. Whatever you call out will rise, right? So if my child is misbehaving and I keep calling out the sin, like, or just calling it an identity. Let's just say my child is constantly disrespecting me, and I say the words, you are so disrespectful. Well, you are is an identity statement. And so when I see that behavior and I say an identity statement to it, you're calling that out. So instead, culture of honor says you actually call out the gold in someone. You can address the disrespectful behavior. Hey, like, how you're talking is very disrespectful, but I know that's not who you are. Actually, you're a very kind, humble, obedient, gracious child, and I love you. I've seen this in you. I watched you yesterday, how someone treated you like this, and you actually responded like this. That's who you are. So you take culture of honor says, no matter how big of a mess you make, I'm not going to see you by the mess you made, and I'm not going to identify you by the mess you made. I'm not going to make an identity statement like you are, so like, hey, you lied, you're a liar. That's actually not true. They're not a liar. they might have that problem, but let's not call someone's identity by the problem that they're doing, right? So culture of honor kind of addresses that concept.
I like it. I think this is where sometimes I see an issue with, not the culture of honor, because I 100% agree. This is how we build. I think that most people are not calling out anything.
Yeah, they're afraid to confront.
We're not wanting to call out the gold, and we're not trying to.
That's true.
Be honest and confront, especially relationships that are closer. Yeah. You don't, hopefully you already know that I believe in you, and I don't, think all these things about you.
And in general, I know you believe in me. Yeah. But it's still necessary 100%. In a healthy relationship for you to keep saying it.
So good.
Hey, I believe in you, or like vice versa, because sometimes you'll be married to someone. It's like, hey, didn't I tell you at the altar that I loved you? Why do you need to hear it every day? But actually you want to hear, I love you. So I love you,
Absolutely. And I just want to make sure that this idea of honor is not misunderstood. It's not saying that you're ignoring someone's mistakes, but you actually care enough to go after the mistakes.
So instead of ignoring it, honor is the most active behavior.
Absolutely.
It's not a passive behavior, it's active, because it's like, hey, you made a mistake. I'm going to have a conversation with you, but the conversation I'm going to have with you is about the root and who you are, rather than about the issue.
100%. And honestly, confrontation has absolutely changed my life. I used to hate confrontation. Even to be in a room where confrontation was done was so extremely uncomfortable because I didn't know my value.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that when I was being confronted, specifically the value piece, that they're just seeing something and calling me up higher.
Yeah.
But in my world, I was like,
it was a statement against you.
100%.
Like you're not enough.
Yeah. So my world would fall apart from any confrontation. And therefore, because my world was falling apart from any situation with confrontation in it, I wasn't going to go and confront, because I didn't want people to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And now it's amazing, because the past, even decade of healing and learning how to go after stuff in understanding the value and what actually makes me, that my mistakes are not me.
That's right.
My shortcomings are not me. God already says who I am. And it's so different when you're operating out of your identity and you're going after confrontation. Because I know people who love to confront, but there's no health. There's no health in how they're doing it.
They like to criticize, and so their confrontation is criticism. And typically, what happens is some of those people, they typically will. It's an identity thing too, because they criticize themselves, and sometimes because they're so hard on themselves and see themselves poorly, and they're harsh towards themselves, they can be really harsh towards other people. I remember when that was true in my life, where I was really harsh in my opinions towards people, sometimes not vocally, but I was very harsh in my judgment toward people, and the reason why, it was rooted in my harshness towards myself. I really looked down on myself. I was really self-abusive, essentially. God had to confront me on that, and said, stop abusing my son. And he was pointing to me, stop abusing my son. I thought it was God,
who am I abusing?
Who am I abusing? And I'm going through the thing, and he's and he points to me, and he's like, my son, you know? And so I remember God confronting me on that, and that was the season where my identity was being solidified, and I went from being an orphan to a son, and God was affirming me. But I think someone can be unhealthy in their confrontation, and it causes a division in relationships. I think when someone's healthy in the way that they confront, they'll actually start to see intimacy in relationships.
So good.
And so one of the differences is, how do you measure whether your confrontation is healthy? Does your confrontation cause hurt and distance, or does it actually cause deeper intimacy? Because the Bible talks about, in Proverbs, it says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. That a friend can actually wound you, but it's so faithful, and it'll draw you even closer. Healthy confrontation can hurt, because truth can maybe hurt or pierce you, but it will draw you in, because there's an intimacy, and there's this culture of honor that it comes with. And I think when we some people just love to be a bulldog in the china cabinet and go in and just destroy stuff, and everyone's afraid, and that's not what we're talking about. That's not called confronting. That's being unhealthy. And I think a lot of leaders, sometimes they pride themselves in, well, I don't bury my head in the sand. I deal with situations, but the way they deal with them cause everyone to withdraw. So they'll find that in leadership, their leadership is very effective because it produces stuff. But in friendship, they'll find they don't have a lot of intimacy because that type of confrontation destroys intimacy rather than builds it. But I think when you actually have a culture of honor, you are able to build intimacy, and your confrontation brings you closer, you know? And I think it's so important that we like started to build that, you know, I don't know, probably 5-6 years ago, it became such a revelation. We started to build that way. And so we were talking, you know, how like we've built a community that we really love. Like we were traveling and we were on this trip together with a ton of our like pastoral team and like really close friends. And it was so enjoyable because we had built a community that's built on like honor and trust.
Yeah.
And, you know, and a lot of people kind of like peer into that and be like, oh, that's so cool that you found that.
Yeah.
And actually, again, like you don't find it, you build it.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people today, they go church shopping or they go community hopping or they go small group hopping because they're trying to find intimacy. They're trying to find community. They're trying to find a table. So they're like looking at other people's tables on Instagram or online or wherever else and be like, wow, like, how did you find that? I'm looking for that. And I think that's, if you haven't found it and you're looking, you'll probably always be looking because the table that you're longing to be at is the table that you're going to build rather than the one that you're going to find. Because if you do find a table of intimacy and you get there and you don't know how to build it, you'll actually ruin it. Right? But if you know how to build it, you don't have to go somewhere. You'll actually create it.
100%.
Yeah.
Like an example of that. I mean, I don't lack relationships and friendships in my life, but I do love to be with people and lead people. And this season I am doing it's sort of a leadership discipleship group, and we go deep. It's about 15 to 20 people that come. And it's been so rich, and I catch myself looking around the room and be like, if I really needed close relationships in my life, I could pick any of these people.
You could build it with anyone.
Because I have gotten to know their heart. I have heard their victories. I have heard their pain. I have heard their journey, their struggles, because they've opened themselves up. Now it's like, oh, there's no hiding in this room. I feel like I've really got to know and peer into their hearts deeper than just who they are in our community when they show up. And because we started to build that, I was like, oh, you know, and I'm someone obviously that's like, I think I lead a lot of leaders in my life, you know, in this, you know, stage. But I always think about the people that are constantly looking for deeper intimacy and community. And I realize that it does not happen without intention. If it's not intentionally built, it's not going to happen to us. And even just an example, like we were in Hawaii all together and it was amazing. We had great times and, you know, with each other one-on-one or 4 or 5 of us, whatever. But when we sat at the table and we shifted the conversation to something intentionally as a group, it just like, it just goes there because people start to open up their heart and you start to really feel one another. And so I think, to go back to the honor piece, I think we don't build enough to honor. We don't draw out of people, like even with our own kids. Like whenever we draw out the gold out of London, it's for years we started to. For years we experienced that, and when we started to honor what's on her life instead of trying to make her the daughter that I feel like she needs to be. It was actually pretty liberating to see God forming her rather than me trying to make her someone she's not. And now I'm just partnering with the Holy Spirit and drawing out the things that I see because he's showing me, rather than like, this is who you are and this is you know who I'm raising you to be. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, and I think with like parenting or friendships or really in any relationship, I think like when you speak to an identity, it like rises up. And I remember probably since like about 5 years old, teaching London about the prophetic, hearing from God, and she started to hear God and became really prophetic and started practicing that. And then one of the things that we did is, you know, we saw seasons where like she was like really bold with the prophetic and giving people words, or like for us, and then times where she drew back. And sometimes I'll encourage her like, hey, like I noticed you're not as bold anymore. Like it'd be cool if you gave prophetic words. Like, and sometimes I found myself focusing on the behavior that she used to do, and I didn't find much fruit in that. But what I have found fruitful is when I remind her who she is. Like, London, like you hear God and you're so prophetic, and the way that people are encouraged when you step into that boldness is so powerful. So you just cast a vision about who they are, and all of a sudden it's like, I didn't have to give her an idea like, hey, you should, you know, write a prophetic letter to all the students in your class before you graduate. I just, towards the end of the year, I just remind her how prophetic she is, how much she hears God, and how encouraging she is. And bam, all of a sudden she gets the idea. So instead of like feeding the behavior or trying to direct someone's behavior, you can actually use culture of honor to call out the gold of who they are, and it'll automatically deal with their behavior.
For sure. I have watched people's lives be transformed by the prophetic, and obviously even students that have come in the beginning of the year, they're this way, and then 9 months later they're transformed by what was spoken over them and what they heard and believed, and took that truth and started to see it manifest or shape their life. And I think it's so powerful because so many times we do want to focus on behavior, because behavior gives us quick results. It's like in parenting, it's like it's so much harder to parent for the heart. It's easier to parent for obedience, because obedience shows us, ooh, my kid is good because they're obeying me today. But their heart could just not be in it, and then 10 years later they don't want anything to do with me or want to spend time with me, but behavior was there. What happened to the heart, you know? And so I think this is such a big one that is a big topic that's super important to go after, because ultimately you're shaping someone's life. You're not shaping their behavior. And when you start to shape someone's life, y'all, it can get messy. Like, I mean, just like, you know, the healing journey of whether it's like emotional, mental, addictions, like when God like addresses stuff in our life, like it can look messy. It's not always perfect, but culture of honor says, man, I see that mess in you, but I know who you really are, because you like, I actually think that honor is tested by how we see people in their worst moments.
That's right. Because it's easy to honor someone when they're crushing it and they're doing really well. But honor is revealed when someone makes a really big mess. Like, how will you see them, treat them, and talk to them when they make a really big mess? And what are you going to say to them? I think that's what reveals whether there's a culture of honor in your family, in your community, in your church, whatever, or not, you know? And you're right. Like, honor is revealed in a mess. It's not revealed in a success.
Yeah. Because it's really easy. It's really easy to look on social media and find that person, be like, wow, this person's crushing it in life because they have really powerful things to say and they're changing the world. But I want to know how that person goes home and loves their spouse and their family, because that ultimately will reveal who they really are. And if we start to go after that, I think that to me is the root system. I love that even in our marriage, I think we have learned learning this idea all the time of, you know, choosing to even not go after the shortcomings that we have, rather having grace for the shortcomings.
Have grace and then speak life.
Yeah.
Especially when someone doesn't really deserve it. Yeah. Like they didn't have a success, they had a big mess. And then you go and cover them and like actually speak life over them. They feel the most like, I don't deserve this right now. Like, why are you so kind to me? And it imparts this grace, this intimacy, and this like covering where it like heals you from the like bad behavior.
Yeah.
Because like you can like go into someone's mess and then make them feel even worse. They already feel pretty bad about a mess. Yeah. And like what we can do is sometimes is make it worse and like take their face and rub it into the mess, you know? And I think culture of honor does the opposite. It finds someone in a mess and it actually is like, I'm going to cover you. I'm actually going to speak to who you are. And I think is one of the most powerful things that we've ever done in marriage is like covered each other when we mess up. I think the majority of the time, probably we didn't cover each other when we messed up. We, called each other out.
Yeah.
But the times where we did cover it, like it's probably the most meaningful. And I think that there's something so powerful. So like culture of honor is not revealed in success. It's revealed in a mess.
Yeah. That's a good quote, babe.
That's a quote.
Okay. But switching gears a little bit, but kind of on the same topic. I think giving people even an example of what, how honor is manifested, let's say in marriage and family, honor is empowerment. I feel like essentially
honor empowers people. Honor is very empowering.
And what is it about empowerment that makes you feel like you can change the world, whether it's in your own home or in whatever you're doing, business, ministry, however that looks like for you. There is so much life on feeling empowered. Yeah. And I guess my question is, how would you describe empowerment even in our marriage? Because I know that I love when people talk about women shouldn't speak. I don't love it, but I think it's funny when people go after that topic with me, because I feel like I was that woman. I was that person that actually believed that, not believed, but obviously I believed that women should have a voice and should speak. But when that was said over me, I took it well. I was like, you're right. I don't need to be up on stages. I don't need to preach. I don't need to speak. I don't need to communicate or preach the gospel, whatever it is, out of fear, really.
Yeah. And you
but
found
I took
a misinterpreted biblical passage to shut you down.
Well, I it wasn't even a misinterpreted passage as much as it was, you're gonna say that, I'll come into agreement with that. I don't mind, because I don't need a voice. I'm really good, especially early on. Yes.
Like, actually, thanks, you gave me a good reason to not talk.
I mean, now if they went after the worship, that would probably but you know what I mean, like it was I settled with the fact, because people often ask me like, well, how did you feel when it wasn't always this way, where women had a voice and were received as communicators, or women that teach the word and speak the word, like that just was not,
that wasn't a thing.
That wasn't,
and for probably most Christian circles in America, it's still not a thing.
You think?
Yeah, for most, for sure. Broad church.
That's true.
Definitely.
I was actually
in our circles, spirit-filled, charismatic, Pentecostal, it's more of a thing, but broadly,
no. I mean, I know there's like, Vic does a whole teaching on this, and he's working on a book. Like, why should she stay silent?
Should she stay silent? Not why.
I'm just kidding. But I wanted to kind of marry that with the topic of empowerment just because I believe that there are women that, do have a voice, but they have been silenced, and they're actually quite okay with that. Because it's more comfortable to be silenced.
Yeah,
so how do we go after, even not just in women, but just specifically with empowerment? How do we empower our spouse?
Yeah, our spouse, our kids, people around us.
Let's start with spouse, because I think that's a practical one.
Exactly, because the principles apply universally regardless of the relationship. Right. But yeah, I would say like, how does honor and empowerment connect? I think like honor is the, I don't know, or like, I guess I would say like empowerment, when someone feels empowered, that's like the breath in their lungs that allow them to go. It's like the fuel in their car. Like a car is great, but when it runs out of fuel, it's done. And so empowerment is fuel. That's like refilling someone. So when you empower someone, you give them fuel to keep going. You give them breath, you give them life, And so I think people will die and run out of fuel, run out of breath, run out of fuel if they're not empowered. And I think a culture of honor and a culture of empowerment go hand in hand, because honor empowers and gives life. Because what it's doing is it's calling out gold rather than calling out messes and mistakes. It speaks to the gold. And then empowerment also basically says, because I honor you, I'm going to speak life over you, and I'm going to see who you are, and then I'm going to say it. And I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this conversation was like, is why is building a culture of honor and empowerment so difficult? Because if this is just like a cool teaching and principle, then everyone would do it. But, you know, why is it so difficult? And I think the reason why it's difficult is because, you know, like even like we're together with friends or with people that we really like have built something in community, and like to shift the conversation from just talking about the weather or laughing or hanging out to intentional conversation, that actually takes intimacy and vulnerability. Because when all of a sudden you start saying like, hey, like I want to encourage you and I want to call some gold out in you, like people are like, okay, because it just kind of shifts the room, both in a uncomfortable way for a lot of people, but also in a very like spiritual, like encouraging way. But like I find that as we're building this culture, that I don't find it very often that people will move a conversation to like, let's go around and encourage one another. Because essentially culture of honor demonstrated is like, let's speak life and encourage. Like, I'm going to talk to who you are, not about what we're doing. Because like a lot of conversations are like, what are you doing? What am I doing? What are we up to? What are we thinking about? Like, hey, I want to speak
work,
life over
ministry, business. Yeah.
And so I think like these cultures are connected, like a culture of honor, an empowering culture, a prophetic culture are all actually interconnected. Because they basically will speak life over someone. And I think, why do we not do that? Why is it easier in our home? I mean, just take inventory in your marriage and in your home. What percentage of your words towards your spouse, towards your kids, towards your friends in conversations, just pick your closest friends, your best friend, your closest friends. What percentage of the conversation you're just talking about stuff? What percentage of it actually are you speaking life over the person? Be like, hey, I was praying about you, or I'm thinking about you, or hey, I see this in you. Like, hey, you're a really good friend. Hey, you're really encouraging. Hey, you're really life-giving to me. Why is it? Why do we not do that? Because encouragement is like this open heart vulnerability language. And most people haven't learned how to speak that language, and it takes time to learn how to speak it. And you have to speak it very intentionally because it's always uncomfortable. And you kind of like get a little bit vulnerable. You know, we call it like kind of, you get a little like naked or exposed or vulnerable, and you could get shut down. It's like, oh, like stop, that's too deep right now or whatever. But like oftentimes we're comfortable with non-heart conversations, but we get uncomfortable with heart conversations. But heart conversations actually create this environment of family, vulnerability, and depth, which like we've tasted of and we long for. And I think that's what everyone longs for. Everyone longs to be seen, heard, affirmed, valued, empowered, honored, you know, spoken life over, aka prophesied over, you know. So like I'm talking about honor, empowerment, the prophetic culture, they're all intertwined because they all give life. But why is that so hard to build? It's the reason why it's hard to build is because you actually have to open up your heart, not just your mind. Because like it's easy to open up our minds and talk about stuff, but what about opening up our hearts and actually sharing from the heart and actually and then feeling like moved by what you're sharing, and where it actually will bring you to like tears. You're moved by what you're saying, and all of a sudden the person's moved because you're moved, because you're sharing more than just words. You're sharing a piece of you, which is heart, because I think who we really are is connected to heart. And I think most small groups, most Christian gatherings, meetings, even messages, podcasts, books, they share a lot of head information, tools, whatever, but the ones that like share the heart and open themselves up impact us the most. Because now we're dealing with intimacy, and intimacy is what we're created for. It's what we long for, and yet we're afraid of it. All of us are afraid of intimacy because we've been hurt by intimacy in lots of areas.
I think about, I think one of the first podcasts you and I recorded, you touched on this, but the woman who came to Jesus with the alabaster jar. I just imagine how costly that was.
Both for her and for Jesus.
Right. But even the idea of like, what if Jesus was like, hey, this is not the appropriate time right now. Like,
what if she would have been
shut down? This is not the right setting.
Yeah.
And
she's coming, she's crying, she already broke it. What if she would have been shut down?
Yeah.
She just spent a year's worth of wages, an entire year's salary. So I don't know, average maybe $70,000 that she just spent. broke the jar open, is crying, and he's like, oh, that's inappropriate. Like,
yeah,
that's a pretty hard shutdown that's going to cause some serious pain. But like, vulnerability risks that.
I think here's what the most powerful thing is about opening up your heart and allowing the intimacy that you're experiencing inside of you, whether it's with the Lord or what he's doing in you, to come forth. I think there is so much power in that step, because I have seen over and over and over again, in the most vulnerable situations in the gospel, Jesus always covers. Like he always covers and defends you when you're the most vulnerable.
That's right. Anyone that got super exposed, he covered them.
This makes me emotional because I have found myself in so many gatherings and moments where I would just like break myself open and share what the Lord is doing because it's so intimate, or because I'm hurting, not because, God is doing something good. Sometimes it's really hard. And you kind of walk away a little bit exposed, naked. And the feeling is so familiar. But whenever I get back into that moment with the Father, I just I can almost feel him covering me because there's a cost and a price that was paid in that. And I feel like specifically when it comes to my life, I think I always imagine that God wants me to walk around with a costly message, not a message that's going to be heady and it's going to be great information. Cool. But the Lord is in my life personally. I'm sharing from what I feel like my responsibility is to impart the heart,
impart the heart
of Jesus, and impart the heart of his love and intimacy and all those uncomfortable, I live for the uncomfortable too.
And the thing is about, you can't impart heart with a message from your mind.
Absolutely.
Or a message on a paper.
And I think you're right when it comes to culture, specifically when we're talking about the honor culture, it's gonna cost you something to honor. It's gonna cost you to maybe walk up to someone, say, can I actually share what I feel towards you? Because whenever you open yourself up, it's number one, first of all, I think people need to learn how to receive honor, because coming from an upbringing where it was yeah, praise God, hallelujah, it's all Jesus. No, it's not all Jesus, okay? Yeah. I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to Jesus right now.
If it was all Jesus, he would have performed it a lot better.
Right? Oh, no. But I'm just kidding.
Sometimes we blame Jesus for stuff that we did, and I don't know.
Or the opposite. People was that was terrible. Yeah. I didn't even do my best, or I didn't even, it's like me when I come on the podcast sometimes, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And someone's like, amazing podcast. I'm like, yeah. And the Lord's like, no. It's not about your preparation. It's not about
your performance.
It's about you opening your heart to people and sharing the good news, whatever that's gonna be. And I think honor and empowerment is costly.
It is.
And I'm watching God even do this thing even in my own heart. Whether I know we kind of wanted to go at it in marriage, but I think it's universal. I think it's
the principle's universal.
The principle's the same, yeah. But I've watched the Lord challenge me to think about the people that are going to take it way further than me.
That's good. I want to take team off of that idea that you brought up, the example of the any time that in the scriptures someone came and brought something that was really vulnerable and they were really exposed, Jesus always covered them. And I'm just reminded of a few examples, but the woman that came and broke the jar of perfume and is weeping on his feet, wiping his feet with her hair, all that's very intimate, vulnerable, especially knowing her history. The people in the room were like, does he know who that is? That was a well-known prostitute that all the bad people in the village slept with, and now she's having this very intimate thing with him: feet, hair, tears, perfume, in a public setting. It's whoa, so vulnerable. And Jesus anyone that tried to criticize that, he was sharply just rebuked them and said, actually, like what she did is going to be told.
Yeah.
So anytime someone like cracked open their life and heart.
Even the woman at the well, I think that was actually really vulnerable.
Yeah.
He went after it with her. And I think there is so much to be said. Like that's like a super like crazy prophetic moment that Jesus had with this woman who was also like, it was like the vulnerable women. Like the Lord was always after the vulnerable ones. And I think the way that moment that they shared, you know, caused her to be empowered to run back to her town.
She tells the whole entire village.
And saves the whole, you know.
Yeah, it becomes an evangelist because she feels covered, and it's empowering, right? When someone feels, instead of shamed, they feel covered. Like he knew she had 5 husbands and the man she was with wasn't her husband. And he doesn't like use it against her, but he covers her. And she's like, whoa. I mean, think about, more women that Jesus covered. Like what about John 8, the woman caught in adultery?
Yeah.
And here she was, you know, in adultery, being uncovered, and then the men that caught her, the religious men, like brought her, caught in the act, uncovered her publicly. She's probably uncovered physically, and now they're uncovering her act and her like in that culture, like clothing was key, you know. And so like if someone's caught in the act of adultery, like they're probably, you know, uncovered, you know. And so, and here, maximum exposure to her deed and who she is, her body. And Jesus is like, dismisses the crowd, covers her, and speaks over her like, you don't have to do this anymore. Like, go and sin no more. Like, I don't judge you. I don't condemn you.
Yeah.
And just that idea that when like someone is in their most vulnerable, that's when Jesus is like the most gracious. When someone's like trying to trap him with their words, they come in with their theological mind. He's the most resistant to that. But when someone's like the most vulnerable, the most uncovered, he gives grace to the humble, but he resists the proud. And I think it just takes a lot of humility, because we were talking about like, why is building a culture of honor, a prophetic culture, a culture of vulnerability, an empowering culture, why is it so difficult? And I think it's difficult because it's easy for us to share from our mind because it's not vulnerable, but it's harder for us to open up our heart. And I think for you, like your greatest anointing isn't necessarily with your words as much, but it's with your heart. Like you bring a message of the heart, and you're like, you want to impart Jesus's heart to people. You want to show people the heart of Jesus, but you can't show people the heart of Jesus using your head. You actually have to show the heart of Jesus showing your heart. And I think there's an anointing for you to just like, and it's costly every single time. Like if you speak or preach or minister, one of the things that I watch you do over and over again is I watch you bring something costly from your heart. You don't work on it being as eloquent or prepared or polished, but you work on it being costly.
Well, I do work on it, but then it doesn't come out that way.
You do work on it, and you're prepared. You're always prepared. You always have notes. You've always done the prayer and preparation, but you allow it to be communicated very costly, and people catch more than the message. They catch the heart. So I think it was profound that you said that. Like, I think what my greatest desire is for people to catch the heart of Jesus, and the way to present the heart of Jesus is through your heart being presented. Yeah,
I think those women really have ministered to me. The other one I think about was Mary and Martha when Jesus comes to their house. You know, Martha's got a point. Like Mary should be helping, but again, she finds herself in a vulnerable position
at the feet,
and Jesus covers her and defends her. Like not only does he cover, but he will defend. He will defend you
against what probably maybe was her job.
Right.
You know?
And because I guarantee you that was probably costly for Mary.
Yeah.
And I think most of us think, well, that was probably just...
Yeah, because everyone's looking like, hey, girl, this is your house. Are you going to host us, or are you just going to sit there?
She's going to host Jesus.
And she's going to host his presence rather than host the people. She's going to host Jesus in her heart rather than, you know, physically, you know, and then Jesus, again, he covers that. So you think about all of the instances where like Jesus covers women, you know?
Yeah.
And men. I mean, I think we often see women being vulnerable too.
Yeah.
I mean, women mostly being vulnerable. And it's like, what are some instances where like men in scripture were very vulnerable and Jesus covered them. I think of Peter when Jesus
Sweet
predicts
Peter.
that he's going to deny him, and then he finally does, and then he like runs away and he's crying and he's like, what did I do? And then the next time Jesus encounters him, he like restores him and covers him.
Yeah.
Like Peter, the last time they were together, 3 times Peter denied him.
Yeah.
And the next time that they're together, 3 times Jesus is like, I want you to tell me you love me.
Yeah.
And so he just asks
That's
him.
vulnerable right there.
Yeah. And so like, here's Peter in a mess, and culture of honor doesn't come in and be like, what in the world? You were with me for 3 years?
Yeah.
And you denied me?
Let me confront that.
Yeah. Instead, he just like covers him and has him express his affectionate love for him, saying like, Peter, this is who you are. 3 times you denied me, but actually I know who you are. Wow. I'm going to have you express love towards me. And then the next thing that Jesus does is he makes Peter the apostle that really becomes the foundational pillar of the church of Jerusalem in that time, and becomes the first kind of apostle that the church is built on, you know?
Yeah.
On Peter. And it's like,
wow.
Peter didn't qualify. He made a big old mess, but Jesus comes in not as the corrector, but as the connector. He doesn't come with correction. He comes with connection. He comes with covering. He comes with, honor and empowerment, and speaks life over him. And I think, just like brokenness. And I think a lot of us, we don't have maybe the table that we're looking at that someone else has. Like, man, you guys have an amazing community, or you guys have an amazing family, or an amazing marriage, or an amazing church. It's like, I want that. Maybe I need to move there. It's like, well, if you do move here, you probably won't have it.
Wow.
Just to be really bold, I'm just like, because it's not about,
I like it.
It's not about getting to the table that has it. It's about becoming that person and cultivating the table.
Yeah, truly.
Because like, there's a lot of people that like get around us because they love what we carry, and then they feel really hurt by us because they're not at that table.
Well, we don't have capacity too, and
but just in general, it's the idea that like
100%. I think
I haven't found it. I'm looking for it. I think I found it. I really want to be in proximity, but then they're not, because, and I think what's interesting is that people that like make their way into our hearts, like, cause like we have a lot of people that are in our hearts already, but people that make their way into our hearts aren't people that like have an expectation to be around us, but are people that just come and just break their heart open. You're like, whoa, I feel intimacy with you, because they're bringing intimacy, and the language we're speaking is intimacy, rather than the person that's like, I want intimacy, but I'm not going to bring it. But it's like, intimacy is attracted to intimacy. And I think the people that like, I think, additional new people that make our way into our heart are people that are like, that speak the same language. They're creating a table of intimacy, and you're just like, whoa, like, I want you. I want to be around you. I'm somehow going to make more room for you in my heart and in my home and at my table or whatever else. And so I think I think going back to that idea, like, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. A lot of people are there when it comes to community. And it reminds me of a famous U2 song. U2 is a band. And
it's a beautiful day.
No,
I'm just kidding.
That's not the song. The song is, I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Oh, okay.
And I still haven't found.
Wow, y'all, I think is singing on the podcast right now.
I know that's probably really off,
crazy.
but that's the melody. But it's interesting that this guy U2, he has like some Christian roots and background, but his whole life he's been searching for truth, and he tried God and he was disappointed, and he writes this song out of this cry, like, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. And I think the reason why he didn't find it wasn't because he wasn't at the right table, because he was at the table of the Lord and was looking into Christianity and all that kind of stuff. It's because like, you're expecting it to, you're expecting to find it rather than build it. And so like, people are expecting to find a relationship with God rather than cultivate and build it.
So good.
And so they're just sitting back, and it's like, no, I don't believe in this because I haven't found what I'm looking for. Like, when I look at the church, I see broken people, and it's like, well, you have to actually build health. You don't find it, And so I think like, a lot of people have not found what they're looking for, and God's answer to them is like, create what you're looking for. Maybe the intimacy that you're longing for, you have to build it. Maybe the marriage that you're longing for isn't going to happen through you divorcing that person and finding one that will work, but it's actually building with anyone, because actually someone that starts to model vulnerability, honesty, honor, like when you sow the seed of honor, guess what you're going to get back? I promise you, you eventually, maybe not the same day, but you will reap the fruit of honor.
Right.
Like in parenting.
Well, it changes your heart.
Yeah.
I think whenever I honor you, it's not about you receiving it and you giving back to me.
Yeah.
It's about my heart shifting towards you as I honor you.
Yes. And what's cool about that is that when you honor me, your heart is shifting towards me.
Right.
And then guess what's happening in me? My heart is shifting towards you.
Yeah.
Because I start to feel honored.
That's what love does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like the answer to your problem isn't, well, that person's so broken, but I'm so healthy. And it's like, we just can't coexist. It's like, no, it just takes one person to just start sowing a different scenario, right? Like the grass is always greener where you water it. And it doesn't have to take two people to water it. You can just be the one that waters it. If you water your marriage, it'll turn greener. Because like we look around and be like, oh man, I just wish I had that marriage. Like that's easier. Well, They didn't come across a green lawn. They watered it. And it's like, it just takes one person in a marriage to start watering the marriage.
Or maybe they're pretending it's green, but really it's fake. I'm just kidding. You know that too. Yeah. Like where you start to get closer to people and you realize, oh,
that's actually fake grass. You bought that.
Thought
you didn't
we
build
guys
that.
were perfect, but you're not. Oh, it's fake. Got it. No, I'm just kidding. But I believe that this message right here, there is some honor inside of you that is yet to be unlocked towards people in your life.
Yes.
That maybe you have struggled with. There is nothing greater. I think honor is cultivated in prayer. I think when you start to pray for something, you can't help but get a heart for it.
That's right.
And so many times in my marriage, I didn't honor my husband because I didn't even pray for him, y'all. Like, let's be real. It was just, I was so busy thinking about how he's making me feel and what I'm going through and my pain and my whatever it was that he wasn't giving me, that there was no heart being cultivated towards him. And I remember seasons that shifted things after. Prayer always followed. How do I say this correctly?
Yeah, well, prayer shifts stuff.
What shifted was prayer. Yeah. And so as I would start
was your heart towards someone in prayer too? Because I think sometimes, like, just to add on to that, I think sometimes people are praying, but their prayer is, God, that man is so broken, fix him.
No. I'll tell you what kind of prayer I'm saying. God, what is it in me that needs to change towards my husband? My prayer wasn't necessarily for you, but I think it's for me to see him rightly.
That's right.
I think one of the biggest prayers was when
God, let me see
I
what you
was
see
praying that prayer, God showed me that he hasn't experienced the love of the Father. And I just started to see that, and my heart was breaking for him.
Mm-hmm. So instead of like, I'm so hurt because you don't know the heart of the Father and you don't know how to give it to me and our daughter London, who was tiny at that point. Instead, you started to see my brokenness, and now you're actually, you have compassion because you're seeing with God's eyes. Right. And you're like, you're actually missing a father heart encounter.
And in more recent years, I think I started to see that, oh wow, there are some things in Vic that were needs that weren't met when he was a child. And I just remember like getting those revelations and like writing them down and saying like, Lord, like, would you just restore that in him? Like, that's crazy, because that's what kicked off your emotional health journey, is you understanding, whoa, maybe, looking back on your childhood, it was amazing, but it wasn't about what was done to you. It was about what you didn't receive, what you lacked. And the Lord coming in and just showing, giving you that realization and bringing you that into awareness, only to shower you, with love and honor. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that I think we're not trying to fake it till you make it. I think we value real, but I think for me, real happens in the presence of the Lord. And every time there's an issue, a situation, whether it's with my spouse, with my child, with, people in my life, people that I lead, people that are, I work closely with, it's always like, I want to take it to the Lord, because that's where the ultimate heart shift will happen. I want to know what happens when I take that to the Lord. And so I think we can pray very professional prayers for people, but when we actually come with that to the presence of like, God, what do you think about this situation? What do you think about this relationship? What am I missing? What is it confronting in me? And making it more about how can I be transformed so that the other person can be affected by my love towards them, by my honor towards them. And then all of a sudden their behavior, their, life is being changed by what we carry.
That's powerful.
And so, yeah, I think to basically finish this off, I'll let you say a few words before we end, but just want to challenge you. Would you dare to bring the culture of honor to wherever you are, whether it's in your job, maybe in your family, if you're, married, with your children? But I think it's so powerful.
In your family, if you're not married, how about let's start with 100%. Parents, right?
That's true. It's just like opening that up. I love that. I love when we do this, I do this with my kids all the time. Like, Emmy, I want to tell you like my favorite thing about you, or London, I want to tell you, and just like, and instilling that in our children where it becomes so natural for them to speak life over each other, where it's not awkward, in some relationships. It feels, awkward because it's usually people that didn't grow up with that or didn't experience, affirmation or affection. And so I believe that so much of God's heart is, affection. And we are supposed to love each other with affection. Like the Bible talks about affection, but we don't show enough affection. Like we should just like open our hearts more. And y'all, like, I was awkward with this stuff years ago. I just know the Lord's done such a deep work where he's transformed my heart so deeply. And yes, you too. You like, I just honor y'all. Vic is like the most heady, loves information, loves research, loves all the knowledge and nuggets. And then it's like when you bring that to the table, it's great. But when you partner that with your heart, you break rooms open. And sometimes it looks like, okay, I didn't get through any of my notes. I didn't get through most of my message, but something shifted in the room. And so I love that about you so much, because in the past, however many years, I think you've really allowed the Lord to do that. But it's kind of vulnerable, because when tears come, you lose, you lose yourself a bit, because you're actually allowing God to come through in a way that's more tangible, and people catch that. And it's powerful because it's impartation that causes people to experience something, and they walk away with, whoa, what just happened? I don't even remember the message, but something shifted inside of me.
In my heart.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything before we close?
Yeah, I think sometimes we focus on changing like behavior or changing an atmosphere, and I think the biggest thing we need to do is focus on changing the culture of our family, of our relationships, of our workplace, of our ministry place, whatever. I think changing culture, because culture automatically will change everything. And I think, because values drive culture. But as you think about like what are some areas that you want to see change or transformed, your sphere that we want to see transformed, and don't think about like what are things you could do to change. Like we need to be more kinder. Actually, no, if you change the culture, that'll automatically happen. Like, kindness is the fruit of something. Patience is the fruit of something. Like discipline is the fruit of something. But when you change the culture, and I think, we started to learn that and implement that like in our life, in our community. And I think I'm still working on it. Like how sometimes I'm not happy with something, or I want to make tweaks to an organization, or, I help lead a couple organizations, Kingdom Movement School of Ministry, our personal ministry, whatever, just organizations that I may be a part of or I'm touching from a distance. And sometimes I want to make changes, but I realize that the best change I can make is actually a culture shift. Good. I don't need to work on, because sometimes it can be like, okay, I just need to be more encouraging. No. If we have a culture of life-giving encouragement, then I won't have to think about that action. I'll demonstrate it, and it'll actually be something that'll be felt and modeled in the room. And so I just think about that. I think the most important thing that we can do to influence something is to shift the culture. And what does that look like? Powerful. How do we, shift culture? And I think we need to shift the culture of our families, of our marriages, of our communities. And I think culture of honor, seeing the gold and calling out the gold, vulnerability, all the things are interconnected, but like you start to have a vulnerable culture when you start to share your heart rather than a heady culture that just focuses on information or teaching or revelation. You have a heart culture, which is a family culture, because in family it's not about exchange of information, it's actually the intimacy of sharing your heart, you know. And so I think a lot of the culture that we've been building is all very interconnected. It's like it's family, it's vulnerability, it's openness, it's honor, it's, you know, prophetic, it's empowerment. All of these things are interconnected, and they start to build a culture that looks differently and feels differently. So yeah, so think about what you're building as a culture more than what you're doing as an activity.
Yes, so good. Well, that's a wrap, friends.
Yeah, good talks.
Here's to culture of honor.
Yeah.
And seeing transformation through honor.
Yeah.
And through allowing the Lord to change our hearts. And I believe that many of you, as you catch this, as you hear this and start to allow the Lord to change your heart, there is like really practical things you can do with that. We shared some of those things, whether it's around the table, shifting the conversations to intentionality and seeing that happen because your heart is already there and maybe you heard it and it just put language to some of the things that maybe you've been even desiring for your community or your friendships or the relationships in your life. And so and in a practical point, like I think the way we make cultures, we model it, because sometimes we're like, hey guys, okay, let's have an intentional time right now and we'll define it. Okay, everyone, we're going to be intentional. But you actually have to start with like, hey guys, I want to have an intentional time, and then you start and model. So good.
An open heart, brokenness, vulnerability.
I bet you're going to start seeing people in a whole new light, and you're going to start to see, whoa. When we start to, like the whole thing I was saying about even like empowering and seeing the next generation rightly, the Lord's just been on me about that. And I think it's caused me to see things that are only, 10, 20 years from now, but I am getting excited because I believe I'm a part of their story. Good. And so I think there's just so much, I think specifically with your children, like start seeing them how the Lord sees them and start fathering them and mothering them how the Lord would.
That's right.
Not based on behavior, but just as the examples that we talked about in the Gospels. And so we love you.
One more thing I wanted to do, just felt
there's always one more thing with you, Vic.
There's always
I love it. You can share
I just felt like there's many of you that are tuning in where you have felt like super discouraged and just kind of deactivated, and you're like, hey, that's cool that it's worked for you, but like there's not really a lot of hope. And I just want to break off like hopelessness off of you. I feel like the Lord wants to say to you that I believe in you. Actually, there's hope. There's hope for you. There's hope for your restoration. There's hope for the restoration of the intimacy that you feel like that you've always longed for or have lost with loved ones, with close relationships. And so I just want to break off the spirit of despair. Actually, it's kind of like suffocated you and you feel stuck. And so we just break that off of you. And the Lord is saying over you, son, I believe in you. Daughter, I believe in you. I'm proud of you. It's going to work out. You're going to make it. So we just remove discouragement, remove disappointment, remove hopelessness, that you're stuck and it's not going to change and you don't know what to do. Sometimes you've even felt like paralysis through over-analysis. I don't know. And so just even over-analyzing stuff.
100%.
You've been in your head. You've been way too much in your head. And it's time to just let that go, fall apart before the Lord, before others.
So good.
And so we just speak life and hope. I speak the restoration of marriage to you in Jesus' name. I speak the restoration of relationships with children, with family members, with parents, a restoration of community where it's been broken. And I just declare that you are going to be a part of shifting culture and building the table and the culture that you've been longing for. You've been longing for a place to be seen, to be validated, to be heard, and you're going to create it through modeling it. So we just bless you with that in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.
Share it with someone that you know would be blessed by this also.
Yeah. Like it, subscribe, share, and we'll see you again soon.
That's right.